Have you ever had a glass of water, just looked at it and thought, huh, what's in this water? Well, yes, there are H2O molecules, but what makes up those molecules? Well, these little tiny things called atoms. So you could be sitting there thinking, what's an atom? Or maybe you're sitting there thinking, I already know what an atom is. Well, I'm going to teach you what it is and what goes in to an atom. Alright, now that I got my lab coat on, let's just button this up and get started. Now, I'm sure you've heard the term atom anywhere, like whether it's at school or just in the neighborhood. Well, the atom consists of three parts: protons, neutrons, and electrons. The protons have a positive charge, the neutrons have a neutral charge, which means they just don't have one, and electrons, you guessed it, have a negative charge. Yes, but what does one look like? Well, each element has a different looking atom because of its number on the periodic table. So hydrogen's going to look different from gold, or gold's going to look different from helium. So the basic structure is the number of protons and the number of neutrons huddle closely together in the center of the atom form what's called the nucleus, which I'm going to get back to later. And then the electrons orbit super fast, going around the nucleus and form what looks like a cloud called the electron cloud. So now that you know what one looks like, let's go to a real-world example. So let's look at the next one. Lithium. Lithium is number 3 on the periodic table. That means it's going to have 3 protons, 3 neutrons, and 3 electrons. But the first energy level, that can only hold 2 electrons. So, what do you do about the third? Well, it's simple. It makes another energy level. But the question is, how do you know how many electrons each energy level can hold? Well, it's just a simple equation. N, we'll make that the variable for whichever energy level it is, squared times 2. So, if you do the first energy level, that'll be 1 squared, which is 1 times 2, 2. Hold 2 electrons. And then as for number 2, it will be 2 squared, 4, and then 4 times 2 is 8. So that means the second energy level can hold 8 electrons. So now, I think it's important that you understand the nucleus. That's a big part of the atom. So let's go learn about that. So, what is a nucleus? Well, a nucleus, as I said before, is made up of protons and neutrons. It's in the center of the atom. It also has the most mass of anything else in the atom, which basically just means it has the biggest effect on the whole entire atom's mass. Which is funny, because it also is the smallest part inside the atom. But just how small is it? Well, let's say you have a dime, and you place that dime in the very center of a football field, and then you walk 50 yards in any direction. That would be how far it would take to get to the outer level of the atom. Which is crazy to think because it's the smallest part, but it's so dense, denser than anything else inside the atom. So just how small is an atom? Well, let's look at something else super small, like 1 grain of salt. In 1 grain of salt, there is 1.2 times 10 to the 18th power of atoms, which is just 1.2 and the decimal moved to the right 18 spaces. So you get an extremely large number. But how many atoms just in the salt would go on your French fries? Well, let's just say you put an average of 1 teaspoon of salt on your French fries, which has about an average of 40,000 grains of salt. So to figure out that, and how many atoms just of salt go on your French fries, that would be 40,000 times that really huge number we found before, which is just the 1.2 times 10 to the 18th power. And then that's just the amount of atoms alone in the salt that go on your French fries.